Welcome everybody to another week of Overwatch League coverage brought to you by us. Yeah, you thought I was going to go into like a sponsor or something. Nope, just kidding. Just us. We don't get sponsored. We don't need sponsors. We don't need sponsors. It's not like we're spending any money on this thing really. This week was weird to say the very least. I mean, we thought it was going to be weird, but I'm going to be honest, I didn't think it was going to be this weird.
Yeah, although, I'm excited. It's a good weird.
It is a very
It's
good
not a
weird,
bad
yes.
weird. It's a very good weird. I want to make this clear. This week was could potentially be the start of the best tournament cycle of Overwatch ever. Also, that's a really good sign going towards playoffs.
Yeah.
If playoffs are as good as this week was, we're in for a treat.
A very, very much
A very
so.
messy,
A very messy
treat,
treat.
but a treat nonetheless.
A treat nonetheless. It'll taste good, but it'll get all
It's
over
like an
your fingers and
undercooked,
face.
yeah, it's like an undercooked brownie, like it's gooey, it's messy, touching it kind of is not good, but it's delicious.
Very much so. I enjoyed this week. But before we get into the matches, one piece of news that dropped actually just today. The Overwatch 2 official trailer just dropped.
Oh yeah.
Well, not just dropped. It was like 7 hours ago, but the official trailer has come out.
People don't know when we filmed this. It dropped 10 seconds ago.
We are now T-minus less than 1 week from Overwatch 2.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time that we record next week's episode, Overwatch 2 will have been out for several hours, I think. I mean, they haven't announced like when on the 4th it's going to be released, but I imagine it'll be somewhere in the afternoon or morning.
Yeah, hopefully it's pretty early. Although, yeah, normally they have things drop. It's about
Usually 10 o'clock, before noon
Western.
or around noon Western on Pacific time. So the final 6. Let's see, because Overwatch 1 servers go down Sunday night, I think, because they're down on the 3rd, or are they also down on the 2nd? I don't really remember. All I know is get your final Overwatch 1 games. I have played a lot over the last couple of days. I have only lost 2 games over the last 5 days. It's been I'm going out on a high note, having fun. I'm just so excited for Overwatch 2. Bring it on. Here we go.
Yeah, me too.
A new era coming in.
I mean, and this has been coming for such a long time. Now that it's about to come out, we're a week away from Overwatch 2. Now, everything feels like, oh yeah, Overwatch 2 is here. But it's been a long time coming.
It's been 3 years coming.
I've said this before. I didn't even know my wife when Overwatch 2 was first announced, and now we have celebrated 2 years.
There's 2
years of marriage
in the time that they've been developing Overwatch 2.
Yeah, so
it's an interesting time frame to point it at.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I've been telling her all along, as soon as Overwatch 2 comes out, that I'm gonna be gone for a little while.
I'm excited. I'm so ready.
In front of my computer. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
I'm so ready for Overwatch 2.
Good. And one thing that I'm interested in, and this is something I thought about just recently, because you sent me the video. They have that video they've released of the super good graphics.
On the RTX graphics.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if Overwatch League starts streaming in anything nicer than what they currently do.
The reason, but I mean, we all know why they stream the way they do, though, because they don't handle the production firsthand anymore. But one can hope. It would be awesome for them to stream in 8K with maxed out NVIDIA graphics, but one can hope. But regardless of the graphics, the gameplay, it was a mess this week. The meta, I don't know. I mean, we saw 32 out of 34 heroes played. We saw every tank hero genuinely played,
tank.
And we saw.
Well, okay.
No. We saw every tank.
He was played, But could you say can you really say that that was genuine? Like
Genuine or not, the Gladiators did win a round with Roadhog, so I you know, even though it was not, even though it was a troll pick, you could tell through Reiner's like expressions, he did play him and it was successful.
yeah, he got a hook
He got a kill, didn't
at
he?
the end of yeah, it was like the very end of the fight. It was like the last person.
It was so much the meta
But
this week. I mean, we saw every tank, we saw every support, and then we saw everyone but Junkrat and Bastion, which I'm honestly a little surprised we didn't see like Junkrat come out on like Sanctum or something at Nepal. But for the
which
most,
the thing is though is we could very well see Junkrat in a future week. We
we
could
could.
at some point, like during this tournament cycle, we could have be able to say that during the course of these few weeks, every single champion's been played, which I don't think that's ever happened in Overwatch League.
It may have happened in Kickoff
At least,
Clash, but I mean that Roadhog pick, I wouldn't say was. I mean, they played it for a whole round. I don't know.
yeah.
It seems like everything can work to some extent, but it seems like the two regions have different takes on it. It's like NA was using a lot of Sombra, and
hmm
either I'm off the goop or it didn't seem like APAC used it quite as heavily as NA did.
Yeah,
Like
and I think part of the reason why it probably felt that way is APAC is normally the region that you do see the Sombra. Like even when Sombra is not, North American meta,
APAC
like
pulls it out, yeah,
APAC pulls it out from time to time, and so it was really weird that it wasn't like
as
a guaranteed
often,
pick for them. Yeah, like and we still saw it a good amount, but it wasn't like
yeah.
every single match like
It
it
did
was.
seem like towards the tail end of the week, the North American meta and maybe even just generally was solidified a little bit. It seemed like most teams were going with like Tracer or Genji with a Sombra, and then either Winston Diva, and then they'd play like Lucio Ana, Zen Ana, something like that. Some teams experiment like obviously the Fuel have just gone to back to their Zarya comp, which I mean it works for them, so no reason to stop. The Charge are doing the same, doing Zarya comps. Shanghai Dragons are doing a lot of Winston, but most teams generally we see a lot of Diva. I mean, we saw Junker Queen even come out, so it seems like anything is viable, and it seems like there is kind of a rock paper scissors nature to it. Like Diva kind of rolls Winston, but Winston's good against like if you're running double slow flex. But all around, it seems like the teams are generally steering towards more dive centric with Sombra. Just
Yeah.
hack the main tank or hack one of the supports and just assassinate them and then win. It's good to see Sombra have that assassin kit now, because I feel like with the previous hack, couldn't really do anything.
Yeah. One thing that I think is worth noting about this meta, I think it was Backbone in a oh, excuse me. Had the hiccups. Um Backbone in a post-match interview, he mentioned cuz they lost the map to, I think it was after the Titans game. Or it might have been after Paris, I'm not sure. But he got asked like about losing the map, and he was like, yeah, that's one thing about this meta is any team can take a map off of anyone. And I think that's it kind of showed like the matches this week, you could kind of get that sense that any team could take at least a map off of anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
um and in some cases like even more, and it looks like some teams are struggling to adjust a little bit, but
Well, what it seems like a lot of is like flexibility, especially in the tank position, is more important than ever. And
yeah.
so we're seeing the teams that do have the flexibility in their tank player without having to swap tank players, or even to be able to play Winston and Diva, but while also being able to play, Orisa, even if you need it. And like even the DPS picks, it's like which DPS player do you put on Sombra, and then if you're gonna play Lucio, do you put in a main support or do you put your flex support you can play Lucio in? So this meta, probably more than any others, is really like how flexible are you? How far can you go with your flexibility? So
Yeah.
it was interesting, and it caused quite a mess in some of the games this week. So let's start with two teams that kind of came out a little flat. if you're the Shock and the Dragons, should you be worried?
No. I mean, Shock. I think really both of those teams, yeah, are guaranteed their spot in playoffs. Like, how much of this is they aren't doing well versus it doesn't matter anymore? Like, honestly, these matches don't matter to them when it comes down to it. Like, sure, seeding might matter
Yeah.
and stuff, but when it comes down to it, it's like these
Yeah.
teams, no matter where they enter the playoffs at this point, if they lose every game this match, it wouldn't surprise me if either of these teams won everything. And that's just how these teams are, you know? And so one bad week, it's whatever. Even if it's this whole stage, they kind of struggle. I'm not worried about either of them going into
Well,
playoffs.
but the problem is if this is the playoff meta.
It still won't worry me because like these are teams that show up when there's pressure.
Shock has had problems with
I
it this
mean,
year, but
Shock has had
so
problems,
is Dragons a little bit. But it's like
but generally, like,
because what it seemed like for Shock were doing weird things.
yeah,
The Krusty Crack Pipe came out full swing, especially in the Justice match. I don't know why they continuously just played Mikey ball with BAP. Like, it's not Mikey's fault. The comp just sucked. I
yeah,
think they
I'm
came
not
in with
really
the
sure
wrong. I
what
think
they
they
were
came in
thinking
with a
there.
misread of what the meta was, because and even like watching their matches this week, Proper really didn't like consistently do what he normally does. It was kind of weird.
Yeah,
And like it was uncharacteristic for the Shock, especially because considering they'd only lost one regular season match up to this point, and it was to the Fuel, and then they come out and just drop two.
yeah, but I mean, the thing about it is like, what was the problem?
The
Like,
comps were the problem in the first
yeah,
match.
exactly. And so it's like if you have comps and then if like you have players not popping off like they normally do, neither of those are big issues. It's not necessarily that they were playing the meta and then just doing it poorly. It's like they were playing weird things and it wasn't working. So it's
Well,
like,
in their second match, they went back to more meta stuff. They stuck with Kaluge and played a lot of Diva and still lost.
yeah,
Uh,
but
I don't know. It just seems off for them. But then again, I think it's their turn to take a stage where they get kind of uncomfortable because both Fuel and Gladiators have had that. And
yeah,
I think I saw a tweet where it was like the winner of the losers finals has underperformed the following stage. So like Fuel did it in Midseason Madness after winning the lower finals in Kickoff Clash, and then Glads did it Midseason Madness, and then in Summer Showdown they underperformed. So you can't go the whole season without getting unlucky with meta. I just hope that they get it figured out. I mean, to be fair, they didn't have like a day to fix their problems from the Justice match into
yeah.
the Outlaws game.
Well, and the Outlaws played out of their minds. Merit,
Yeah, they had a turnaround. I think for the Shock, because they don't have. I wouldn't say that they have a super cushy schedule because they still have to play. They play Spitfire. They play. I think they play the Rain, and they also play the Defiant. So they don't play any pushover teams for the most part. So I mean, they're really getting basically what Gladiators had last stage, and they're just gonna have to fix themselves. It's just they've now lost more games in 1 week than they have the rest of the regular season combined. But whatever. Dragons, on the other hand, I think the Dragons are suffering from what they suffered in the Kickoff Clash. I think it's
yeah,
the same kind of issue.
yeah, it definitely seems that way. Um, but I think just like with the kickoff clash, it's not anything that's gonna stick around forever. Um,
Uh, we say that, but I mean, this is a problem that the Dragons have been having all season. Is like if they're not able to just permanently play Void, they do not look very good.
yeah,
And
I think they definitely have more of a tank issue than like I think especially in the Soul match, you really saw Smurf just kind of,
walk all over Fate, yeah.
yeah,
And even Fleta has been having a very poor year compared to other years that he's had. And like that coupled with their, I mean, they're running like Lucio Moira comps. I mean, they're all in on the Fate Winston when really I think they should just go the Dallas route, just play Void all the time because they just look so much better when Void is in. Because losing to Dynasty 3-0, I mean, yeah, they beat Dynasty 3-0 twice last stage. So, I mean, you can't really, like, okay, I guess it's just the flip of the script. But then they lose to Charge as well. And, I mean, if you lose to Charge, that means you might lose to teams like Hunters. You may fall to Fusion. I mean, yeah, they're guaranteed playoffs, but seeding, I would imagine they want to be able to get top 4 so that they can have a bye in the first round of playoffs. And if this is the playoff meta, then I would be worried for Dragons. Shock will figure it out, but Dragons have been having this issue all season.
Well, I feel like if Dragons can find a way to, like we said, play, do kind of the Dallas Fuel thing and play to their strengths, I think they'll be fine. And I think this meta does allow for it. Also, I think Kiriko could kind of point things in Shanghai's favor because, like, if you look at when Shanghai does well, it's comps that are very similar to like the Overwatch 1 style of play, where it's like it's a lot of very strong team based comps,
Yeah.
And I think that's where they kind of excel, and I think Kiriko kind of
Enables that.
yeah, she definitely, especially with her ult, I could see her being a character that kind of plays to Shanghai's strengths, and so if she's meta, that could be a thing.
Yeah, I just hope they get it figured out because I don't want to see the Shocker or Dragons just boom out in the playoffs. That'd be kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, especially after especially
yeah,
with Shock doing so good the first few stages of this year. If this is the beginning of the downfall for them, that's just.
I mean, at the end of the day, a good regular season means nothing if you can't do anything at the playoffs at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like, the difference between a perfect season and a team that goes 500 doesn't matter if the team that goes 500 wins the whole thing. So it's not about how you get there. It's what you do when you actually get there. So hopefully they're able to right the ship in this next week. There were some teams this week, though, that surprised us a little bit. I want to start with the Valiant. Even though they did lose, they performed better against the Dynasty than I think the Dragons did.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. And then they beat the Fusion. It seems like the Fusion are just the team that just lose to Valiant. EasyHan and Dia kind of popped the heck off when they were playing.
Yeah, it was a cool match to watch, especially because coming into this, we were like, oh man, the Valiant are boomed. They just, lost their coach. And
Marv won. He's back.
The fact that they even played is, admirable, but the fact that they were able to put up good performances, kind of crazy.
I think the Valiant are continuing the narrative this season that if you're doing poorly, just fire a head coach and then suddenly you're better. I mean, it worked for Boston. It worked for Defiant. Paris Eternal, take notes. Take notes, Paris.
The question: head coaches, what are they good for? Absolutely nothing.
I don't know. I mean, London Spitfire, good. I just feel like
I know.
It's just kind of odd that it's now happened. I'm pretty sure almost every team that has fired their head coach so far in the middle of the season has gotten better, at least in the following matches. Like Paris Eternal, take notes.
Yeah.
Take notes. You might want to maybe change something.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to, and I don't know the behind the scenes kind of deal, but it's just I've noticed that if you're in a bad environment in terms of just being surrounded by people you hate or whatever, it's hard to do well. And so if there's contention between coach and players, or there's not respect between coaches and players, it's just not possible to do well, as a team, because there isn't that team unity or anything like that. And so I think with these teams, there's obviously reasons for firing the coaches, and we don't know all of those. I mean, Valiant is kind of a weird circumstance.
Only signing half season worth of a contract.
Yeah. And so I don't know that it's necessarily the case with that, but I think for at least one of the firings in the past, couple months, it definitely feels like that might have been the case, and so maybe it might be something like that with the Valiant
I
as
mean, their
well.
season is still they can still make it. They are 2 points behind the Charge, and they do play the Charge, obviously, but they have to get an extra win in there somewhere. Speaking of the Charge, though, I think they probably swung up the most. Obviously, like coming out of Summer Showdown, like the Charge did go into that tournament as the 4 seed. So like they were, or was it the 3 seed? They went in with a good seeding, and like this team is looking on the up and up. And despite what we all thought, Piggy actually came in and just replaced Krong and kind of rolled.
I mean, rolled is kind of like I'm kind of on the, not necessarily on the Guangzhou Charge train with this week, because it's like they lost to Chengdu
In 5, though.
and then they beat Shanghai in 5, but it's the Shanghai that got 3-0'd by Seoul. Like we just talked about how Shanghai's obviously having problems, and so Guangzhou winning isn't like that absurd, and so I think things aren't in a terrible spot for Guangzhou, but like if they were to play, um,
I
if
mean,
they were to
I think they
play,
beat almost half the teams in APAC. Because Spark look like a mess, like always.
yeah,
They
I
beat
think they
Valiant in
beat
the
Spark.
head-to-head, and I think they'd take it to Fusion.
I
Because
don't know that they would beat Valiant though.
I think that they'd be able to beat Valiant.
I think it'd be close.
I do think it would be very close. Charger playing quite differently than a lot of teams. They're going really heavy on Choice 01 with Nanoblades and stuff. And they're also doing Dallas Fuel's Zarya comp. I don't think there's any other team other than Dallas who is playing Zarya more than Charges. I mean, they're going all in on the Piggy Zarya and all in on the Choice 01 Genji. So it's a very, very unique strategy to them, because not even Fuel are pocketing that heavy into a Genji, even though Edison did pull it out a whole lot this past week. That's not typically what they build their Zarya comps around. But
Yeah.
I think that they would be able to beat Valiant. And even if they played Hunters again, I think that they would be able to take, they played 10 times. I wouldn't be surprised if Charge took half of those. So Charge are definitely top 3, top 4 in the region, because they'd take down Spark, and they just took down Dragons. And with how inconsistent Fusion are, I would probably take Charge over them. I think the only team that would not be favored against is Dynasty. But I mean, who is favored against Dynasty? Nobody. So
my random hypothetical question with the Charge. So this week we got to see what Piggy can actually do right now, which we never really saw in Houston. And so my question is there a world out there where if Houston had just leaned into the Piggy Zarya in stage, like the first couple stages, like, and kind of did a Dallas Fuel thing earlier in the year, like would they have been able to,
I don't think they
pull
would
it
have
off?
performed
Would it
better
have
than they
been
would have. Because I mean, they've gone 4-2 every. No, they went 4-2 the first and third stage, and went 5-1 in midseason madness. I don't think a Piggy Zarya comp would have helped them get further in playoffs, because kickoff clash they were knocked out by the Shock. Midseason madness they were knocked out by a red hot Atlanta team, and then Summer Showdown they just didn't perform. It wasn't they didn't get like beat in a close game. They just got rolled. So I don't. It's like I don't think if they had leaned into the Piggy Zarya, I think their season probably would go about the same, because they're just like Piggy is a very good player. It just seemed like the Outlaws decided to go in a different direction. But I don't think leaning into Piggy would have changed their current what their record is up till now and how they've performed up to now. Now it may help the future look better, but up until this point, they probably have the same record. I don't imagine it would have
well,
changed anything.
and I think on that same kind of note, because I'm in the same boat as you. My reasoning, I think, though, leans heavily on like what, like when Outlaws is doing well, like why, what looks good. I think the Zarya comps go good with the teams that just can read each other's minds and just play as a team out of, like, just
The
go
Hive Mind
nuts.
teams, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Outlaws is not a hive
No, the
mind
Outlaws are
team.
not a Hive Mind.
Outlaws, it's Pelican Merit popping off, or Dante popping up off, or Lastro getting some crazy boops. Like it's always like pop off
Yeah, I
performances,
don't
and
think
it's like any of their
Piggy wouldn't, because we saw when Piggy was in, the team did not look as decisive in what they did. Whereas with the Charge, it looks like he just slots in better. I mean, it could be it's an all-Korean team. He's,
yeah,
back in Asia, and they have a very specific kind of play style. So it's good to see. I mean, we didn't think he was going to get playtime because Krong wasn't performing poorly, but they just seem, maybe Piggy Zarya is just better than Krong's, which would be why he's playing. So I think that they have a lot to prove, and they just have to fend off the Valiant, and then they should be safe. The final team that performed quite well this week was the Boston Uprising.
I don't want to talk about it.
You don't want to talk about the Boston Uprising? Uprising came out swinging this week. Out of these three,
tragic. I'm just kidding. It was beautiful.
Boston looked very good.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, because like you look at their game against the Outlaws and you could be like, oh, that they just read the meta better than Outlaws, and everyone gets lucky every once in a while. But then to go and just 3-0
and
Florida,
roll the mayhem, yeah.
Okay, like maybe these guys are finally living up to, because we've been talking for a long time about how like Boston, they show like these hints of life. They show that they can do well, but they just never quite show up when it matters.
They never keep Punk in all the time. Genuinely, if Punk had just been the 100% starter from day one, Boston probably would have a 500 record.
And this week they looked really good, and it'll be cool to see if they can continue it up. Who are they playing next week?
Good question. Look that up for us.
Will do.
It was just fun. Punk is so good. I don't know why he was ever benched, ever. Like, they have the map win rate discrepancy between when Punk is in versus when the other tanks are in is crazy. There's no other team in the league that has that big of a discrepancy between their tank players at all. Like, his map win percentage, I think, is over 60% now. And their other tank win percentage, I think, is like, what, 13%? It's tragic.
Oh, they've got a rough
Who do they got?
Couple of games coming down. So they are playing against Washington.
Winnable.
And they're playing against the Glads.
Probably not winnable.
I don't know if those are both.
I would say Justice. I think they're probably both next week. The Justice game is definitely winnable for Boston. The Glads game is not, unfortunately, for Boston. But they probably aren't. If they're being realistic, they probably aren't looking at the Glads match going, "Oh, here we go, guys. Here it is." They're probably looking at the Justice match and looking at other games, and prepping for those. Because I mean, they are comfortably in play-ins. I think they're like 3 or 4 points ahead of New York. Like, and of Titans. They have no chance of falling out. They're just fighting for seeding right now.
Yeah.
So I hope the Uprising continue trending upwards. And now, the Outlaws.
Uprising.
Oh, okay. This week we had another case of a tale of two outlaws. I think the question that must be brought up then was the game against Uprising a trial game, or did they just get outclassed? Because we saw it at the beginning of the Summer Showdown as well, when Doge played the entire time. And then they got reverse swept, which is a different situation than what they had this week, because they just got rolled. But it's like, what are the Outlaws trying to do with Doge? It's like, I'm not sure what their plan is with him.
Yeah, I feel like Doge is one of those players that it's hard to know exactly like what his future is going to be like, because like I know he's supposed to be like really solid player, but so far in all the Overwatch League matches he's just kind of fallen flat. Pretty much I'm pretty sure he has like, does he have any he
won 2 of the 4 maps that they played against New York. So it's like they looked good for 2 maps when he was in, and they got reverse swept. So like that series, you can only take so far. But like this match that they played against Boston, it's like eh, I
And
don't
I think part
know.
of that is
Punk looked
crazy
really good.
good,
The Outlaws were getting
but
dismantled, and it seemed like they lacked a lot of initiative when they were playing. Like they just kind of stood there, and Doge just kind of got farmed, like perma farmed, especially in Eichenwald. They would just kind of stand there, and either the backline would die or Doge would just be out of mech all the time.
well, and I think largely what it comes down to is Dante is such a
A gaming
like
warlord.
yeah, well, and I think part of it is like he's kind of the voice, the in-game voice, most likely from what it
It's
looks
what it
like and
seems
stuff.
like.
And so I think, with him out and Doge in, I think it just cuts communication down. You don't have, because Dante, you look at the way he plays a lot of the time, and you know, it definitely seems like he's the one calling the dive targets and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And it seems like no one's doing that when Doge is in. And as a result, they just
Fall
get
apart.
engaged on and fall apart.
So then the question is, because we know from Doge has said that he will not be coming to the US except for LAN events. So that tells me that he will be there for playoffs potentially, but that he's not going to be in the US during the season. Now, as to whether or not what that means for next season, I don't know. Like, if I'm looking at this Outlaws roster, the only thing we know is Pelican will not be on this roster next year. There's no way Pelican stays. I don't think that there's any shot that he really does because he probably doesn't
Yeah.
because he came for Piggy. So they'll have a hole in flex DPS. Do you fill that with Dante, or do you have Dante grind out tanks and become a tank player?
No, I think you just leave him tank. Like I think the role's fitting him. The team's gotten used to it. And if you're keeping most of the same roster, you just keep Dante. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you just keep him on tank because like he's good on DPS. Like he's really good on DPS. But like is he I feel like it's it seems to be that it's easy to find good DPS players. It's not necessarily as easy to find good tank players, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, like, if we talk about DPS characters, it's like you choose any one character, and it's like you can list 10 players in the league that are just absolute legends on them, but you choose a tank character, and it's like they're like three or four, like it's just the 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 tank role is so much more specialized, and as a result it's harder to find people that can flex around it. And so Dante has the kind of, he's the type of player that can grind out, and I
Become
think
good at the heroes.
yeah.
So then
And so
I tend to agree with you. I think that there's enough talent and contenders that'll be coming into the league next year that the Outlaws should be able to find a Pelican replacement of some kind. And obviously,
assuming Pelican leaves, because
I mean,
there
there's
is
a
a
world in
chance.
which he doesn't, but I think we're
Yeah.
all operating under the assumption that he probably will leave, just because of the circumstances in which he came to the team no longer being the case. I mean, if he stays, well, then great. But I think even if he doesn't stay, as long as the Outlaws don't just like whiff on talent, which honestly, as long as Junkbuck has been with the team, they've actually been really good with scouting contenders talent. Because last season
Yeah.
they got Jungwoo and Piggy, who were both good for the team, and this year they found Merritt, who has been a really good player for the team, and then have made the decision to put Dante on tank. And like from the outside, it looks like a really weird decision, and it looks like it's cruxing them a little bit. But I think if they just lean into it, if they just, there are rumors that Junkbuck won't be staying with the team for next year, which means it might just be Jake's team. And honestly, if I'm Jake, I almost like have a talk with Dante and like figure out if Dante wants to go back to DPS or if he's like down for anything. And if he's down for anything, I almost say Jake should just tell him grind out the tank heroes, just
Well, and
become a
that's
tank player.
something he's even said, because like a little while back there was talk that
He wanted to play
um
DPS again.
yeah, he wanted to play DPS again, and he came out and he was like, I don't care what I play, I just want to play, and I just want the team to win. And so it's like I think he's the, assuming that's true, and it definitely feels that way. It
Hmm.
feels like he puts, the team and just playing anything above like his personal preferences. And if that's the case, then like I I say just grind tank.
I want to see the Dante Reinhardt next year. Let's see it. Let's see the Dante Reinhardt.
eh, eh,
Enough of that,
I
though.
don't know about
The
that.
final teams to end on, just kind of briefly, the Reign and the Gladiators. Reign took down the Defiant, but then they played New York, which aren't a great team, so I don't really know how much you can say there. And then Gladiators play Mayhem and Titans. So, I mean, you can only take so much from those games, but it looks like they're back. They're back after a fairly tragic summer showdown. It looks like Reign and Gladiators have been able to right the ship a little bit and are back in their comfort zones.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And with
Yeah,
Shock,
probably.
it's Shock's turn to take a little bit of a nosedive. So it's Glad's up to fight the fuel for number one, and Reign will continue to do their things and probably throw a regular season match or two like they always do. Because Reign are still fighting for guaranteed playoffs. Their win with Defiant going 0-2 and them going 2-0, I believe Reign have jumped them in the standings. I think they are now a point ahead of them, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're now at 14 and Defiant still sit at 13. And now really what they're looking at is seeing if they can jump the Spitfire. Now the Spitfire start their gauntlet of, oh my goodness, they start their gauntlet this week. But Reign do still have to play Shock, but I feel like with how Shock is looking, that's winnable for the Reign. So I think Reign are probably gunning for that 5th seed. If not the 4th seed, if the Outlaws boom out a little bit. But at least the 5th seed. They're looking at a better spot. Then Glads are just trying not to lose the 3 seed, which they shouldn't. So
Yeah.
just fun mentioning them. But now let's attempt to construct power rankings from what we saw this week.
And we won't do what all these other crazy people
And putting Spitfire a bottom 4 team in the league. All right.
Yeah, I have seen some of the worst.
Both Avast
ranking.
and Custa put Spitfire super low. Like, I get that Spitfire played like the 2 worst teams in NA, but that doesn't mean that they're like I don't understand.
Yeah.
So looking at this, Fuel 1, Glads 2. Is there any arguments there? I don't think so.
No, I think that's solid.
Shock are not in the top tier anymore. I think they dropped below this first tier break that we have.
Yeah, and I would put Outlaws 3.
Outlaws 3 do in the tier break with Glads and Fuel or no?
Not yet.
And then Reign 4 then, I would imagine?
Yep, Reign 4, and then I'd go Shock.
I would go Shock and then Justice Spitfire, Spitfire Justice. Or Boston. Where do we want to throw Boston into there? Do we think that
Boston goes under at this point?
Okay. So I guess it's like, where do we think Spitfire lies in terms of Toronto and Justice? Because Justice kind of got, I mean, they played about as well as a team of that caliber could expect against Fuel. Like, you get the pity map and then you just kind of like lose a slow death, and then they took it to 5 against Shock. And then Defiant lost a close game against Reign and then got reverse swept against Excelsior. But I mean, you and I have our feelings when it comes to reverse sweeps, in that they're not always a very good indicator of whether or not that team is worse than the team that beat them. So I don't imagine that we should be too hard on Defiant, considering their losses. I think it's just, how do we think Justice? Do we think what Justice did this week will be normal?
And I think that's a very solid question. And I don't know, like, will the Justice be able to continue on? That's been the question all season, and every single time they've dropped the ball. So I think you can't rely on the Justice to be consistent from week to week. It's like, kind of like, like, I always give teams the benefit of the doubt, like Shock, they have one bad week. I'm not going to drop them down to the bottom of the list. Justice, they have, a good week here and there. I'm not going to jump them to the top. So I think
they're definitely above Mayhem, and I think,
yeah, definitely. But
but then the question is, do we think they could beat Defiant or Spitfire? I think then is the question.
Yeah, and I think on a good day, yeah, they could be either one of them. But
So
Are they gonna
then,
have that day?
so then let's keep the. I say then maybe keep them below Spitfire and Defiant for now, as we're kind of feeling it out.
Yeah, and I think Boston is one team, like, definitely in the same tier
I
as
think they're
them,
definitely
and
above Mayhem.
definitely could pop above any of the other teams as time goes on, but at this point, I would put them under Justice.
Yeah, because I mean they beat the Outlaws, but the Outlaws they beat weren't. That was a different Outlaws, like, and obviously different Outlaws. They just had a different. They didn't have Dante in, and then they beat the Mayhem convincingly. So I definitely think the Mayhem aren't in the same tier as these middle teams. Um, Mayhem above Titans? Yes, no. I would think so.
Uh,
I mean, they performed
yeah,
better against Gladiators than Titans did. I honestly think Mayhem are almost in a tier of their own because I think they could convincingly beat New York, Paris, and Titans, but I mean, they got rolled by Uprising.
so my question is, does New York go above Vancouver?
New York got
They beat Toronto.
they beat Toronto and then got put in their place by Atlanta.
But it's against Atlanta, and it was a pretty strong Atlanta.
True. I would probably say you could probably put New York above Titans. And
For now.
then I think New York could be competitive with Mayhem. I think they could be. So I
Yeah.
would put Mayhem and New York in their own tier break, and then Titans. Do we think there's a tier break between Titans and
I don't
Paris? Do we think there's a big gap between those two right now?
I don't think so. I mean, it's still hard to tell with this meta being new, and both teams kind of had some rough games this
Mm-hmm.
week, like just rough matchups, and they have a lot of that, over the
Yeah.
next couple weeks. So it's hard to say. I would keep them together for
Keep them
now.
together. And then could there be an argument made to throw a tier break in this middle group of 7? I feel like you could make an argument to put a tier break between Shock Spitfire or even
Yeah,
between Rain and Shock, but I think Shock Spitfire a tier break probably makes more sense there.
yeah, that's exactly where I would put it if we were
Because
to.
even though Shock lost to Justice, I don't think they were playing weird stuff. There's no way they do that again.
Yeah,
But
I think if they have a really ridiculously bad week this week,
then we can think about dropping them below teams. Yeah.
then I think we drop them a little lower. But one bad week is nothing.
No, especially against a good Outlaws team and then the Justice.
Yeah.
Anybody can lose the
And
Justice.
I feel like San Francisco Shock, they fill the same spot as me in my head as if you look at Cloud9 in the LCS, like this year for example, going into playoffs, they were 5th seed. Cloud9 was
Mhm.
going into LCS um playoffs, and then they ended up just stomping and winning everything. And it's like everyone always acts surprised when stuff like that happens, but it's like it's Cloud9. That's what they do. And San Francisco Shock, no matter how far we put them on the tier list, like
They'll be able to get back
there's
to where they
always
need
the
to go.
chance that at playoffs they just run away with it because it's the Shock, and that's what they do.
It's what they do. Moving over to the chaos that is APAC. Dynasty 1 tier break.
Yeah.
1 tier break or 2 tier breaks?
We'll do one for now.
Just 1 for now. All right. I would say the second best team in
We'll add one
APAC.
for each week.
I would say the second best team in APAC from this week definitely looked like the Hunters. The Hunters looked the most comfortable out of the remaining teams. I mean,
Which is really weird
they
to say
took down the
because
Charge, and then what was the other game? They took down the Spark, wasn't it? Pretty convincingly, a 3-1,
Yeah.
I believe. So Hunters definitely the second. I mean, they keep getting away with it. They keep lucking out with Jinmu's hero pool. I don't know how they keep doing it. Then the argument comes: who is third? Is it Charge or is it Valiant?
I think it's Charge.
I think it's Charge as well. And then I think you put. See, now it's weird.
I wouldn't drop Dragons any lower.
Yeah, I think Dragons stay fourth.
They had a bad week, but
I think Dragons are
can't
fourth.
drop them out top 4.
So then Spark, I think, are definitely dead last. They looked the
Yeah.
worst this week. So, and Valiant just beat Fusion. So I think you have to put Valiant above the Fusion, right? Like,
Just this week. Yeah.
are there any tier breaks anywhere in here? In this bottom group?
I don't think so. Like I think things descend in a
Pretty
steady
standard.
rate. Like if I were to put one, it'd probably be between Dragons Valiant, but I
Yeah.
don't think Dragons looked good enough this week to.
No. Dynasty are the
They've
only
done
team that looked
that.
far and above better than everybody else. So, these power rankings look way more reasonable than everything else. I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, I don't know how people are genuinely putting Boston above Shock. Like,
Yeah.
Boston looked good this week. But no, they're not. No, that Boston team is not beating the Shock.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
I think what it comes down to is people don't watch the matches, and
The people who
and
get paid to
I'm
analyze
saying
the
the people that
matches,
get paid to analyze, they aren't
they
watching the
aren't
matches.
watching the
They
matches.
don't know Overwatch. They don't know anything. They're the
Oh man.
unqualified ones. We should get paid for this. I'm
I
just
think
kidding.
our power rankings. I think the only changes you can make are just in the NA side on that third, that basically that middle tier of Spitfire, Defiant, Justice, Uprising. I feel like those four could flip any which way.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I'm
Am I
happy with
putting
these.
Spitfire higher than most people would because I'm a Spitfire fan? Maybe.
But I mean,
But
I'm agreeing with you though. I
But
mean,
I think it fits. I mean, the thing is like people look at their games and they're like, oh, they were a little closer than they should have been.
yeah,
But
I mean,
it's like
everyone is
when it
rating
comes
them
down to
lowly because they
they
lost
won,
a map to Paris and to
but
Titans.
they won.
But they won, exactly.
And if you look at the way they played those games, like I don't know if you noticed this, but London played those matches like really conservatively.
Yeah, they
Like
didn't. They
they
played
they
not
would
to lose. It was
they
weird.
would hold a point and they would get 99%, and then they would just like be saving ults and lose the fight, and then the other team would come back and get like 80%.
Hmm.
But then Spitfire would come and wipe them out. So it's like all the matches, all the maps were pretty close. But then the Spitfire, like it was never a doubt whether or not the
Yeah,
Spitfire would win.
I think we'll see what Spitfire really is made of this week, because this week
Yeah.
is brutal.
Yep.
Fuel Gladiators and back-to-back days. I'm pretty sure that is quite possibly the hardest week schedule that
Think
is
about this:
conceivable.
if they survive this week, if they take maps off of either of these teams, like if they look competitive, then
If they're able to
that's enough.
take
Like
a
if
map off
either
of,
of
if
these,
they're at least able to take one map off of Fuel and Glads, that's
yeah,
you can
and if
walk away
either of
happy.
them go to map 5,
Then you can walk
then
away
that's a
really
win.
happy for the
Yeah,
Spitfire.
if they make it to map 5, they win. If they lose both of these matches and then beat the Shock next week, or at least look competitive against the Shock, uh, I think that's still amazing for them. And I think no matter what, like those 3 matches,
Hmm.
which I think are their next 3, I think they play
No,
the
so I
Shock
think they
next
play New
week,
York. I think they play New
oh,
York
and then
next
the
week,
Shock.
and then Shock. So they've got a little they've got a buffer in there, and then they'll play Shock. It's just
But yeah, I think either way, like those 3 matches honestly don't like they aren't deal breakers.
no,
They don't kill London. But if London wins any of them, then like
they are deal
all hail
breakers.
London. Yeah. Like that's the thing. And so I think next like this week it's really rough for London, but if London look good at all, then it's a win.
It's a win.
And
It's an
so I
absolute
think it's
win.
win-win for London. Like
Win-win for London.
there's no like bad.
No, there's no downsides for London.
Yeah.
So moving on to predictions, our favorite part when we get to pred APAC games and have no idea what's going on. Hey, you got the Dynasty pred this last week, so
Yeah,
I mean,
I flipped the coin the right way this time.
you and I tend to pretty much always pred the same in the Dragons Dynasty matchup, and it like
Yeah,
never
it's
is
'cause
consistent. It's never consistent.
it's because I'm a Shock fanboy and they got my boy.
All right, so the first match, Dragons versus Fusion. The inconsistent team versus do Dragons bounce back? I think the Dragons bounce back. I'm gonna hope in Moon's coaching that they're gonna learn from their mistakes this week, but I could see MN3 just decide to show up and go, nope, I win. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think, you know, like I said, it was one bad week, and if they decide to opt in and play the things that they are comfortable winning with,
Mm-hmm.
then I think they'll do fine. I think they were just misplaying a lot this
Yeah,
this last.
I hope that they turn things around. But I mean, if there was a team that would just beat the Fusion have this season occasionally just decided to show up and beat the Dragons. Next up, Shock Defiant. I think Krusty turns it around. I don't see Defiant beating this team. You?
Yeah, I think like if this was against the Glads, London, Dallas, Atlanta,
Any team
anyone
that's
like
above
that,
anything that we have above the Shock in the power rankings,
or any team, honestly, any team that we have.
I mean, Defiant
Like
are.
I think if they were playing Boston this week, there's a chance
No,
I would tread Boston, but I don't like the Defiant, and that's what it comes down to. So I'm going to tread Shock.
It simply comes down to I don't like your crappy team. I think Shock turn around. I think they're fine this week. All right, next one, Rain versus Justice. I think this comes down to which Justice shows up, but I think regardless, I think Speedily Venom clear.
Have you noticed that the Justice have gotten so much more reliable since Happy left?
They got more consistent since they had players. They no longer had players to rotate in and out of their roster.
Exactly, and so I think just for the heck of it, I'm gonna.
You're gonna go the Justice.
Justice.
I think this should be a good game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game, and I think it'll come down to like who's popping off, because I think these teams are both fairly evenly matched.
Well, and they play their own weird stuff. Rain, I think, is one of the only teams that consistently was coming on Speedily Echo. There was a lot of Echo coming out of the Rain, and we will probably most definitely see a Battle Cattle mirror matchup between Kalios and Hawk, which should be fun. We haven't
really seen much of. We've seen
a little bit. We've seen a little bit of mirror. I think I'm pretty sure it was mirrored in NA, but I don't remember who mirrored it.
I can't remember either, but we haven't seen a ton of it. It wasn't
like no
a match or anything, but
I hope this match is good. I hope Justice show up, and I hope Rain just continue to do what they were doing so we can have a super good match. Moving back over to the APAC side of things, Valiant versus Spark.
I think it's going to be Valiant.
I also think it's going to be Valiant.
Spark was so terrible last
Spark,
week.
I'm going to need somebody to explain to me why Teru and Neko are in over, at the very least, why Super Rich isn't playing. Like, okay, fine. If you want to bench Irony, fine. But Super Rich has been playing fine out of the two. Like, if you had to pick one of them, I would pick always, like, Neko hasn't played on a roster in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And Teru used to be a DPS player.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. And
Spark are just defaulting into their old ways of, oh, we have players to sub in, we will sub them in.
Why do they have so many players?
It's in the contract. They must always have a 12-man roster.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's not as ridiculous as the 5 DPS players.
The 5 Valiant DPS players? Yeah. I don't know. Spark, you're off the goop always. And then the final match of the week that we want to pred, this one should be very good. Atlanta Reign, San Francisco Shock.
Or very bad.
Or very bad. I think it more depends on how well Shock is able to change.
Well, earlier I said, if the Shock game was against any of
the teams above them.
So I've got to.
I'm going with the Reign.
Reign are just like, I'm hoping, like, I'm a Shock fan. Like, when it comes down to it, just historically, I've always liked the Shock, and so it's like, I really want the Shock to win. I want the Shock to turn it around, but I think Reign are just coming back with a vengeance after not making the tournament, and they're looking really strong right now.
Yeah,
and the Shock haven't given any indications that
the Reign have more to play for than the Shock do this stage. I mean, Reign are playing to guarantee playoff spots. Shock are really only playing to keep the 1 seed or the 2 seed.
But as a Spitfire fan,
you want the Shock to win.
So, but it should be interesting. I think that's potentially going to be, you know, kind of like the
That
match of
should
the
be
week.
contender for match of the week. There aren't really any other game. I mean, unless Spitfire shows up, but at least going into the week, Shock Rain looks to be the best match of the week.
Yeah.
At least it
But
should be.
either of the Spitfire matches could
Could
end up
turn
being
into,
like a legendary classic match of like epic proportions.
because the Outlaws, for the first time this season, have a bye week. So I'm not rooting for anybody in particular.
Oh wow, that's weird.
Except I'm not directly rooting for the Spitfire only because I need to keep the point buffer. But if they win, so be it. The Outlaws still have a 2-point buffer. And now we end with play of the week, which we were going when we were watching the Outlaws Boston match. There was a pulse bomb that Creative slept. He slept Valentine and killed him with his own pulse bomb. And I was gonna do that, but then a certain thing happened during the Dragons Dynasty match that was too good to pass up. Lip thinks he's like, oh, I've got Fitz. I got him. And then the changes perspectives and Fitz is right there. Him and Prophet just take him out back. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Of a Sombra camping, the other Sombra's translocator, but the other Sombra is in the room and ready to just jump him and take him out.
Yeah, it was
like it was
so funny.
It was so fun. It was like Trid lost it. They were just losing it there, and the casters were. It was just so funny because you're just like, oh, Lip has got him, and then the observers just change perspectives. You're like, oh wait, nope, he's actually being hunted. Sorry, Lip. Bye bye. Unlucky. GG go next. Try again next week. Unlucky. Yeah. So we move into another week next week, but this time Overwatch 2 will be in our hands. I will probably have spent all of the day playing Overwatch 2 because I only have one class in the mornings and nothing else. So I will be playing nothing but Overwatch 2 on Tuesday.
Yeah, and that's gonna be weird. You know, the next time we put out an episode,
Overwatch 1 will be no more.
Overwatch 2 players. And yeah, Overwatch will be dead. Like, I mean, it's already dead. It's a dead game. But it'll be more dead.
It'll actually cease to exist. It'll actually be 6 feet under, never to be seen again. No resurrection for this game.
Yeah, and now 5v5.
5v5 forever.
I won't have to wait 20 minutes to find a DPS game.
Yeah, because everyone's gonna want to play Kiriko.
Earlier today, with one of the fast pass things, it was a 16-minute wait time for DPS
with a priority pass.
With a priority pass.
I've never had it be over 12, and even then the queues don't usually take 12.
Yeah. Well, I didn't wait because I didn't want to wait.
I usually just put myself in queue, put on a YouTube video, and just forget I'm in queue until I queue in. I'm just trying to grind out wins. I've only lost 2. I think in the last 5 or 6 days, I'm like 12-2. My Junkrat has been popping the heck off. It's been kind of nice. But everybody enjoy the last fleeting moments of 6v6 Overwatch 1, and then we will move into a new age of 5v5 where you don't have to worry about someone picking Roadhog when you've picked D.Va ever again. Instead, you'll just be stuck with a Roadhog. Oh, good, happy, fun times. Enjoy the week. We'll catch you all next week when we're all Overwatch 2 players. Take care.
Bye.